The auction yard was silent except for the wind sighing through the dry cottonwoods. Dust swirled around boots and wagon wheels, drifting in lazy spirals as men murmured among themselves. It was an ordinary spring morning in 1873, and the people of Fort Kearny were gathered for another grim spectacle: the auctioning of captives taken after the latest skirmish between settlers and the Apache. They called her the Quiet One. She was perhaps 17, maybe 18, no one could tell exactly. Her skin was bronze like sun-baked earth, her hair a black river that fell in two thick braids down her back. A strip of rawhide tied at her neck held a small turquoise stone, the only thing she had left from her people. She stood still on the platform, neither flinching nor lowering her gaze, though the crowd stared at her as if she were a wild animal. The auctioneer, a sweating man with a red face and a white hat, cleared his throat. "Next up, we got this here Apache girl," he barked, his voice echoing off the wooden walls. "Strong, healthy, quiet. Good for housework or field labor. She don't speak much English, but she's got spirit." Someone laughed from the back. Another man spat into the dirt. "Startin' at $200, the auctioneer called, slamming his gavel against the block. No one moved. The wind carried the sound of a horse snorting, the creak of a saddle. The girl's dark eyes swept the crowd, once calm, unreadable. $150. The man tried again. "She's worth more in that, folks. Look at her, strong as a young mare." "Anyone?" Still nothing. He sighed, mopping his forehead. "All right, 100. Half price. Someone give me $100 and take her off the army's hands." A murmur spread through the crowd. Half price. But even then, no one raised a hand. Not because she wasn't worth it, but because she was Apache. The word carried weight: fear, hatred, the memory of burned wagons and raided camps. Behind the platform, a soldier shifted uneasily. The girl, still as stone, felt none of it. Her mind was elsewhere, far to the south, where the mountains rose like old gods and the wind carried her brother's songs. She remembered her mother's hands weaving, her father's voice at dawn. All gone now. The fire, the soldiers, the chains, they had taken everything except her silence. That she kept as her last weapon. "Come on, folks," the auctioneer pleaded. "You won't get a better deal in the whole territory." A voice came from the back. Calm. Low. "I'll take her." Heads turned. A man stepped forward through the dust. He was tall, wearing a faded duster and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. His boots were scuffed, his gunbelt worn smooth by years of use. A trail-worn horse waited behind him, and a scar crossed his left cheek, a thin white line that caught the sunlight. "Name's Eli Thompson," he said quietly, handing a folded stack of bills to the auctioneer. $100. The auctioneer blinked, surprised but pleased. "Sold. To Mr. Thompson." The gavel fell with a hollow crack. Eli walked to the platform as the soldier untied the rope from the girl's wrists. She didn't look at him, not even when he took her arm gently and led her toward his horse. He could feel how thin she was, how the bone pressed beneath her skin. He didn't speak until they were out of town, riding slow along the dusty trail that wound toward the river. The sun was high, the air shimmering with heat. "You got a name?" he asked. No answer. "All right," he said after a moment. "Guess you don't owe me that." They rode for hours in silence, the land flattening into wide plains dotted with mesquite and sagebrush. He wasn't sure why he'd done it. Maybe pity. Maybe guilt. He'd fought Apaches once, years ago, and seen too much blood. Or maybe it was something else, something about the way she had stood there, quiet and proud even when men stared at her like she was nothing. By dusk they reached a small cabin near the edge of the Brazos. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a few chickens pecked at the dust. "This is home," he said, helping her down. "You can sleep in the lean-to for now." Ain't much, but it's dry. She followed him inside, her movements graceful and guarded. He poured her a tin cup of water and offered a plate of beans and cornbread. She hesitated, then ate slowly, her eyes on the floor. My name's Eli, he said again, softer this time. You can stay here till you figure where you're going. Nobody's gonna hurt you. Still no answer. But he thought he saw a flicker in her eyes, doubt, maybe, or curiosity. Days passed. She worked quietly, tending the garden, mending shirts, hauling water from the river. Eli noticed how she moved silent as a shadow, alert to every sound. At night she would sit outside, looking at the stars. Sometimes she hummed under her breath low, haunting notes that carried through the dark. He never pressed her to talk. He just made sure there was food, a place to sleep, and no one to bother her. One evening, as he was repairing a saddle by lamplight, she spoke for the first time. Why? He looked up. Why what? Why you by me? Her voice was soft but steady, her English rough around the edges. Eli set down the awl. Didn't buy you, he said. Bought your freedom. She frowned slightly. Freedom, not something to buy. He nodded. You're right. But sometimes that's the only way men understand it around here. She studied him for a long moment, then turned back toward the door. My name is Nanton. Eli smiled faintly. Nanton, he repeated. That means something. Means speaker. He almost laughed at that. Fittin' name for someone so quiet. Her mouth twitched, the shadow of a smile, and she slipped outside into the moonlight. After that, things changed between them. She spoke more little by little. She told him of her village by the mountain, of her brother Taji who sang to the horses, of the white soldiers who came before dawn. She told him she'd run until her feet bled, but they caught her anyway. Eli listened without interrupting. He told her about the war, how he'd fought for the Union, how the killing never really left a man's eyes. How he came west to find peace and found only more graves. They worked side by side as spring bled into summer. Nanton learned to milk the cow, to bake bread, to ride bareback across the plains. Eli taught her English words she didn't know, and she taught him Apache ones he could barely pronounce. Sometimes they laughed, but word travels fast in small towns. One afternoon, as Eli rode in for supplies, a rancher named Cole Avery stopped him outside the general store. Heard you took in one of them savages, Cole said, his tone sharp. That true? Eli's jaw tightened. She's got a name. Nanton. Cole spat into the dust. You gone soft, Thompson. Folks don't like it her livin' out there with you. She's free, Eli said simply. Ain't nobody's business but mine. Cole sneered. Ain't nobody ever really free out here, cowboy. That night, Eli said nothing to Nanton, but he oiled his rifle and kept it close by the door. A week later, trouble came. 3 men rode up while Eli was out mending fences. Cole and 2 others, half drunk and full of spite. They shouted at Nanton, calling her names she didn't understand, laughing when she refused to answer. When one reached for her braid, she struck him with the water bucket, hard enough to make him stagger. By the time Eli heard the commotion and galloped back, the men were already gone, but the front door was broken in. Nanton sat on the ground, trembling with fury, not fear. I told them to go, she said through clenched teeth. They say they come back. Eli knelt beside her. They won't, he promised. Not while I'm breathin'. And they didn't. The next time Cole Avery tried, Eli met him halfway down the trail, rifle across his saddle. Whatever passed between them stayed between men, but Cole never came again. When the first cold wind swept the plains, Nanton packed her small bundle of things. I go south, she said one morning. To find my brother, maybe my people. Eli nodded slowly. He'd known this day would come. You sure you'll be safe? She smiled faintly. I was safe before you bought me. Just didn't know it yet. He laughed quietly, though his chest felt hollow. He handed her a small pouch of coins. For the road. And a horse take silver. She knows the way. Nanton hesitated, then touched his hand lightly. You good man, Eli Thompson. Not all white men are bad. He looked away. Not all Apache are, either. She swung onto the horse and turned toward the south. The wind caught her hair, lifting it like a dark banner. Maybe someday I come back, she said. I'll be here, Eli answered. She rode off across the plain, a small figure against the rising sun. The land swallowed her slowly, until only the dust remained. Years later, people would talk about the quiet Apache girl who vanished into the desert and the cowboy who bought her freedom. Some said she found her people and became a healer. Others claimed she was seen near the Rio Grande, riding with traders, her turquoise stone shining in the light. Eli never told anyone what really happened. But sometimes, on warm nights, he'd sit by the river, listening to the wind. And in its song, faint and far away, he thought he could still hear her voice soft, proud, and free.